Hello everybody. Thank you for those that are with us this morning on YouTube. We are about to start our discussion on a path to a just transition, industry decarbonization as an enablement of the decentralization of the global supply chain. We've been, as E+, working a lot this concept of climate change as a means of development and the need to take this opportunity to decentralize the supply chains, to spread the wealth a little bit more along the world, and also to see energy transition as an opportunity for us to get to this green new industrialization that we talk here in Brazil. And for this, we have four very, very distinguished colleagues that will give presentations that help and will help to us to better understand and to better think this just transition in industrial development. So with no more, Fernando, I'll pass the floor to you. Fernando is an economist. He holds an economist degree in 1989. Sorry, Fernando, 1989. I'm also from 1989. I also have my degree in 1989 from the University of Central Venezuela, and a master in public administration from the Harvard University in 96. Today, Fernando is a senior executive at CAF, and will also help us with a new concept and some new ideas to push forward this just transition and decentralization of industrial supply chains. Fernando, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna. Good morning, everybody. And I will first, I would like to give my a salute to Instituto E+, because this invitation is to talk about something that for everybody it's part of our life. So let's start with the presentation, and I just let me here. Can you see it?
Oh, good.
Okay, great. So
Questions?
let's start.
Just one sec. Questions, please. If you want to, you can put your questions in the chat on the YouTube, and we will get back to them in the end of this presentation. Sorry, Fernando, I had forgot to say that.
It's okay. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So let me start with this old model that comes from the industrial organization. This model tells us how any firm can behave, and as you can see, you from the left side, you see the arrows that come from supply and demand that impact structure, the structure of a firm, how it works. Then you have the conduct, then you have the performance. Above all, you have government and how government impact this, all the three columns. You have competition policies, antitrust policies, and so on. And then I add something new in this. It's this no industrial policy, which is normally we have industrial policy in the in the above and the government, but I would like to signal this very important change in the world right now. The energy transition has brought us an important geopolitical changes. And this is basically because the world, until very recently, the energy came from basically the oil and gas sector. But now we have a new competitors, new actors, I would say. And then you have the minerals required to the energy transition, where you can produce in a way that is very efficient with solar and wind, and you can see that this is not everywhere, even though that you can produce with wind and solar in most part of the world, but to get efficiency, you have to be in certain part of the world. So, and then the tensions between countries, and basically between US and China. So, in this new industrial policy, we have now this new words, I will say, onshoring, nearshoring, and friendshoring. Those words are basically from US perspective. Onshoring means firms that go back to US. Nearshoring are those that are close to US. And friendshoring are those that, even though they are not close to the US, but they are considered friends. And how this friend is set, and also at the nearshoring, you have to have, as a country, you have to have a free trade agreement with the US. If you are not in those free agreements, you cannot be considered neither nearshoring or friendshoring. And why is this? Because in terms of this IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, to be considered to get the fiscal incentive that law brings, you have to be classified under those words: onshoring, nearshoring, and friendshoring. But then came this another word, power sharing. Power sharing is something, it's a word that Jorge Arbache basically brought to CAF. And the idea with power sharing is...
Fernando, sorry for the public who is still with us. We are really sorry. We had an issue, a technical issue, but we are back. Fernando will continue his presentation. Go ahead, Fernando. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Rosanna. So let's talk about what solutions, what we can bring to industry, across the industry solutions. First, electrification programs. In the region, we still have some industries that may change because their technology may change using fossil fuels with electricity. So this is one thing that we can do immediately. The other thing that we can do, and I know Brazil is very good doing this, is the energy efficiency programs. We have a lot of different areas where you can work in energy efficiency, but in the industry, energy efficiency in motors and the cooled chain and cold chain. I'm sorry. There are many areas where you can improve the energy efficiency in the industry. Then you have those industries that are hard to abate the use of fossil fuels. First of all, you have low carbon hydrogen, which mainly will be produced with a process called electrolysis, and you use wind and solar, but also you can produce hydrogen, blue hydrogen with methane and capturing the CO2. But the low carbon hydrogen will be very, very important for the steel for the steel industry. And there are we are seeing the first factories that are using some mix of hydrogen to produce steel. Then you have the new fuels. New fuels can be e-fuels that are also produced with low carbon hydrogen. And then the biofuels. Biofuels are very important. Brazil it's a leader in biofuels. The aviation industry is looking to increase the amount of biofuels in their industry. So this is very important, and this is something that where Brazil not only have the comparative advantage, but also the competitive advantage. Then we have the carbon capture, use, and sequestration. That, as I said before, it's going to be needed to produce the blue hydrogen, and to finish this, new materials. To produce cement, we will need new materials, because the production of cement, the chemical reaction that it's produced when we produce cement produce CO2. So we need to bring new materials to the production of cement. So to finish my presentation, I will go very fast with this. Some incentive that can be done. Green procurement programs. Governments, local governments, and federal government can ask for green programs. I mean, this is basically asking those providers of any type of product to the government that part of their production is green. Then you have carbon prices. Carbon prices it's something that it's very important to go from fossil fuels to other type of energy. Then the federal funds for research and development. This is also one of the incentives that you can bring to the table. And finally, there are these thematic bonds or green finance. The thematic bonds are those bonds that are created in a way that you have some key indicators and will bring a better, or I will say, a better conditions in terms of what you find in the market. So let me finish here, and let's go with the other participant.
Thank you so much, Fernando, for this interesting presentation. And in fact, this concept that you bring, the power shoring that was basically cooked inside CAFE's brains and George Abashi, it's an interesting way of seeing this new decarbonization of the industry, and perhaps a way to go around some of the very polluting supply chains that we have around the globe. So thank you so much, Fernando. Without further ado, I invite Celine to talk to us, to give us some on her impression. Celine is a dear friend, and also she holds a PhD in economics from Université Paris 1, Universe Paris 1. She is now a chief program officer in the IDRI, which is IDRI is a think tank to facilitate the transition towards sustainable development, which has a lot to do with our agenda here and with what we are trying to discuss. And previously, Celine was from the OECD, leading several policy-relevant initiatives, established stakeholder platform, sorry, and also hold ministerial discussions on greening business and green investments. Celine, the floor is yours. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Rosanna. The pleasure is mine, and thank you and Milena for the invitation, because it's a great opportunity, and I think that I hope my presentation will complement the presentations of the other great speakers on the panel, because you mentioned it, I'm from IDRI, which is a Paris-based think tank, so I'm going, I think, to bring the perspective from Europe as well in the discussion. So at IDRI, we work on sustainable development, as you were mentioning. We have launched a new program, a new industrial policy that is very much focused on the EU, but we also host a platform which is called UKAMA, and that gathers think tanks from Europe and think tanks from Africa to improve the dialogue between the two continents on green industrial policies. So what I'm going to mention today is very much related to the work that we've been doing within these two programs that we host. And first, I wanted to start because I think it's very important to put discussion in context. I wanted to start by saying that transition, in particular energy transition, is a major driver of structural changes and new market and economic opportunities. And the numbers are super telling worldwide. In particular, if you look at the number in terms of renewable energy capacity development across the world, this is really staggering, impressive. If you look at the International Energy Agency numbers, you can see that renewable energy capacity grew by 50% just in 2023, with solar PV accounting for 3/4 of the additional capacities that were installed. And of course, the largest growth took place in China. But if you look at the numbers, the increase in renewable energy capacity in Europe, in the US, and in Brazil all hit an all-time historical high. So major structural change there. And this is, set to continue also because I think as of today, more than 30 countries, including China and others, are committed to doubling or tripling their renewable energy capacity by 2030. And in particular, solar PV and onshore wind deployment through to 2028 is expected to more than double in the US, in the EU, in India, in Brazil, compared to the last 5 years. So major change there. But it's not the only sector. If you look at, for example, electric vehicles, and you know that in Europe, in 2023, the ban on new thermal cars by 2035 was approved, and that decision alone generated a jump in the sales of electric cars in Europe of 37% in 2023. If you look worldwide, the electric car sales increased by 35% in 2023, and we expect continued growth in the coming years. And if you look at the scenarios and projections that would be compatible with the Paris Climate Agreement, this would mean that the sales of electric cars rises from 18% today to 65% in 2030. And this is in turn pushing up the demand for batteries by a factor of 7. So major push there. This is the case for critical minerals as well, which has seen very strong growth in 2023. And the benefits of the market expansion, and I think this is really worth telling, are really shared across different regions, especially for mining. So Latin America, for example, captures the largest amount of market value for mined output. If you look at the scenario by 2030. But Africa is likely as well to witness a 65% increase in market value by 2030. If you look at the refining part of the value chain, because I was talking about the mining part, 50% of the market value from refining is concentrated in China, according to scenario by 2030. So why am I saying that? Because first, there's a huge opportunity that is coming with the energy transition in terms of market production, structural changes, and so on. And there are also very strong economic and social rationale for countries to transition to greener industrialization. Although if you look at the country context, those motivations differ across continent, of course, and across countries, depending on the industrial, economic, and political context. So in Europe, decarbonizing industry is seen as a critical opportunity to achieve Europe's objectives in terms of security, including energy security through diversifying of supply sources, strategic autonomy, because it's important to remind that Europe is a continent that is scarce in resources compared to other continents, and competitiveness. But it's also a very important priority to actually achieve Europe's climate objectives, including through the phasing out of fossil fuels. And I want to add another priority that is becoming more and more important in today's Europe, is the social objective of these new industrial policies and transition-related industrial policies, because you can see with the recent votes in my countries at Europe level, with the strong push of the extreme right, that it reflects a lot of the social discontent. And so the social agenda, in particular the job agenda, retainment, how do you treat the displaced workers and so on, how you ensure the reskilling of the labor force has become a very important priority. It's not necessarily the same in other countries that are less industrialized or less developed, and where this energy transition is seen as a major way to foster industrialization that did not necessarily happen in the past, and that in particular Africa is not left on the side again, and can capture some value in the recomposition of the global value chains. It's also seen obviously as a major opportunity to connect big bulk of the population to energy services, electricity services, and lift out major parts of the population of poverty. So what we see concretely on the ground is a race for these new industrial policies that creates as well a risk of deepening world inequalities. And that's why it's very important that we look into how this trend is happening and the opportunity for new partnerships. Otherwise, there's really a risk that some of the smaller countries are left on the side of the road. So all these new industrial policies, and there's a very interesting database that is being developed by the IMF on that, comes with a lot of industrial policy interventions, new state interventions in the economy. The IMF has actually assessed that there were more than 2,500 industrial policy interventions worldwide in 2023, with China, EU, and the US, we mentioned the IRA already, accounting for more than half of these new measures in 2023. Of course, there are differences in the measures that are used. There's no one blueprint of industrial policy between continents, US, China, Europe, but also with emerging economies that are also using these industrial policy measures. What we see in US, China, Europe is a massive use of subsidies, while in the emerging economies, what you see more is the use of trade restrictions on imports and exports. So there are positive elements or consequences with, a drop in prices, major production of important green techs and so on. But the negative potential outcome of that race is, of course, the smaller states that do not have the same fiscal space, do not have the same capacity to compete and to massively subsidize their own industrialization policies. So what are the conditions for a shared prosperity? This is what we're looking into through our UKAMA platform. Well, the conditions are both domestic and collective. At domestic level, all countries, including smaller countries, should be supported to develop their own industrialization strategy. Again, there's no blueprint, but at least long-term industrialization and transition plans and strategies are very important mechanism and condition to provide a clear reference point to investment and to align the various funding flows, both on energy access and on manufacturing industries. Collectively, I would like to mention two elements. It is important that the multilateral system, notably the trade and the investment rules, are supportive of industrialization and a shared prosperity across countries. And I want to mention two elements here. The first one is we have antiquated international investment regime, and I think Clovis is probably going to discuss the FDI and the investment regime. And this regime so far is not aligned with the Paris Agreement and allows the dispute, in particular through the dispute settlement mechanism, to perpetuate fossil fuel investment, which is a real impediment to some of these new, greener industrial investment. On the trade facilitation side, we can see a multiplication of standards, regulations, be they government-led for regulations or industry-led for standards, and sometimes they prevent market entry and trade trade entry. So it means that there's a need to facilitate trade for countries, but also to harmonize some of the standards and make them more interoperable so that they don't prevent market entry. And then just to finish on the EU, because the EU, of course, is the center of attention on the multiplication of regulations and trade-related tools like CBAM that are perceived as being neo-protectionist and detrimental to the industrial development of developing countries. But of course, the EU, being a resource-scarce continent, won't be able to develop its own industrial policy without establishing these new or, promoting these new strategic partnerships with countries that are resource-rich. And here, it will be very important that EU develop these strategic partnerships, but in particular, develop finance cooperation that are very important for developing countries to finance green transition, in particular in Africa, but not only, and that can rely on these clear transition pathways, long-term planning. And I'll stop here because I know that I've been too long, but I'm happy to come back to any of those. Thank you.
No, absolutely not, Serine. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive view on the matter. What is very striking from what you said is that first, what we call Global South, we have not to see Global South as one like homogeneous thing. There are several different types of development and stages of development and kind of development as well, because development has not to be all the same. And what you said in the end, that Europe is intrinsically not a resourceful in terms of natural resources, and Europe has to count on others. And then Europe also has to see that development has to be shared. So what you bring on standards and how to incorporate more common, let's say, way of seeing decarbonization technologies is quite important. With this, then I'll pass the floor, Celine, to Jefferson. Jefferson is the Tech and Innovation Director for our National Industry Confederation, National Industry. First of all, is Jefferson there? Is he back or not?
No, I've always been here.
Oh, sorry, Jefferson. So Jefferson, our dear director for tech and innovation from the National Industry Confederation or Association from Brazil. He holds a PhD and also mechanical engineering degree from University of Santa Catarina and
Germany.
Germany. Yeah, Aachen. In Aachen, And he is also a professor at the Aeronautical Technological Institute, based in São José dos Campos, and is a director of the Fraunhofer Project Center, also in the Aeronautic Technological Center in São José dos Campos, Institute in São José dos Campos. Jefferson, the floor is yours. It's always a pleasure to have your impressions and learn from you.
Thank you so much, Rosanna. Actually, I changed my speech based on some words of those fantastic presentations of my predecessors. Thank you so much, Salini and Fernando, for this. And I would like to share with you how the Brazilian industry is seeing this opportunity for chaos, may I say, with some strategic numbers. Okay, so let me share with you my presentation. And here, can you see that? All right.
Yep.
So the title is "The Dilemmas of the Brazilian Industry for New Ancient Times." Actually, the situation is that the Brazilian Confederation of Industry presented in 2021 at COP29 in Glasgow the strategy actually not only to support a low carbon economy, but actually in order to amplify our Brazilian power or competitiveness in this, as you said, Salini, in this world trade balance. You know, so in order to combine such kind of ideas, we based our strategy in. I'm having some small problem here. We based our strategy in some 5 pillars: energy transition, as you told us, Fernando, carbon pricing, circular economy, forest conservation, that is very important here in Brazil. When you talk about development in Brazil with some foreigners, we have to talk about our forest conservation for sure. And also digital transformation, but as an early adopter. How can you use digital transformation as an early adopter? So then, just to understand a little bit more and to provoke some ideas, 2020 was not the year only for COVID-19. Was the year in which the number of people over the age of 65 was greater than the number of people under the age of 5, Rosanna. And also the birth rate is decreasing worldwide speaking. And in Brazil, is 1.8. That means 2 Brazilians do not generate 2 Brazilians. In my home state, Santa Catarina, South Brazil, is 0.8. So this means needing to, 1, product suitable for older people. That means digital transformation of customs. Also, 2, flexible more mass production to meet more consumption models. Industry 4.0, you should be more flexible in terms of productions. And 3, new transversal and horizontal value chains due to new productions and also new products. If I don't know, but if you agree with this analysis, this very tough equations created, developed by Yoshikaya, says that in order to avoid the greenhouse gas emissions in this conventional world, that's very important to say, this conventional world, we cannot change the GDP. We are not allowed to change the GDP, the way we measure the GDP. We have to protect the population, and also changing the type of traditional energy is the key point. It's our only way. But the consequence is that, as you told us, Fernando, worldwide speaking, the average consumptions of contemporary citizens is 22,000 kilowatt years per year. 22,000 kilowatt per year. In the beginning of industrial revolution was 5,000. Nowadays it's 22,000 kilowatt per year. So that means we are completely dependent on coal, oil, and gas in order primarily to produce transformation and mobility, not electricity. Electricity accounts for just around 8% of the energy consumptions. So mobility and transformation, as you said, Celine, exemplifying the case of electrical cars. Mobility and transformation is our key point. In that case, solar and wind energy have been key technologies to be improved in houses, not in production, not in mobility. So, in the other hand, in a very close future, as you can see in this map here, in this graphic here, in a close future, we are going to face metal extraction peak years, also metal supply peak years, actually forcing the demand for recycling degrees and new designs for eco and bioproducts. So, circular economy, biotechnology, eco design, it's a business model. So, so they are key strategies in order to leverage the future. Also, the economic complexity, as my colleague will present in 4 minutes. It's quite clear that and evident that the 70 sustainable development goals are fundamental to our growth, no doubt that. But it's quite important to understand that in our real world, it will mean increasing the supply of around 40% more water, but 40% more food. Brazil is very strategic in this market, and also 50% more energy. And that is the point in Brazil is a key place to empower this power supply, world power supply. So, and let me say some words a little bit more. Talking a little bit more about energy, it is fact that to maintain the digital cloud we are having right now, the digital cloud and a grow digital transformation. The planet's energy consumption is right now approx 11 times the Japan's energy consumption. The Japan's energy consumption. And the expectations for the next 7 years, just 7 years, is that will be equivalent to 20% of the world's energy. So energy is a key point. The strategy to support a low carbon economy is based on energy. And if it's to mobility and to transformation. And that is the place we are talking about. Brazil's comparative advantage is very high. And our main goal is how can we potentialize the greatest biodiversity on Earth, the largest forest covered, the world's largest water resources, biofuels, low carbon metrics. So how can we enforce this advantage? So that in our case, we are trying to apply programs based on mission, as Mariana Mazzucato has improved. If you can have, for example, a scalability continuously and sustainable issues, we have to look to how can we improve your infrastructure, the quality of people, market analysis, and also regulations and legislations. But in that case, Brazil is not an entrepreneur state. We have to group our companies in Brazil, and then I can show you during the discussions. We can group some companies, and then if you can do something like that, Rosana is doing right now this. If you can do some kind of microeconomy, we can influence the role of state. So it's a little bit different of the mission-oriented programs based on Mariana Mazzucato theory. So thank you.
Great, Jefferson. Great presentation. Thank you so much. And yes, Brazil has a bunch of comparative advantages. It's good to see that CNI, or the National Industry Confederation, has this view, Jefferson, that we can do better with our resources than we are doing today, with some incentives and some market for our greener products. So with this, I invite Clovis from UNCTAD. Clovis is Junior Chief Commodity Research and Analysis Section Commodities Branch of the Division of the International Trade of Commodities of the UNCTAD, UN Trade and Development in Geneva. He is an economist, but he's also an engineer from the same institute as you, Jefferson, from Aeronautics Technological Institute. He has a computer engineering, a master's degree, a master's degree in the University of Brasilia, and a PhD in the Netherlands, in Maastricht. So Clovis, with all this, I am really willing to see what you have to say and present to us. I saw a flavor of it before, and it was great as well. So the floor is yours, Jefferson. Sorry, Clovis.
No, thank you very much, Rosanna, and thank you very much, colleagues, for inviting me. It was great to hear our colleagues in the panel, Fernando, Celine, and Jefferson. I really took a lot of notes. Look forward for the discussion after that. I just go quickly share my presentation, and we'll be talking about exactly the topic of this discussion today. And what I would like to start with is with a picture that I always want to bring to give us the perspective. You know, today, 95 countries out of 195 that are members of the UN are commodity developing countries that are commodity dependent. And this is showing this graph. All these countries that are in colors there export over 60% of their exports are primary products, commodities, either agriculture, mining, or energy. And you see, so this is a big issue still today. 60 years ago, when UNCTAD was created, was exactly to address this particular issue, and this is still an issue today. And why is it important for us to have that in mind is because if you look at each technological revolution since the Industrial Revolution, the divide between developed countries, these countries in this graph in red there is the GDP per capita of the core of the global economy, basically Western Europe, US, Japan, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And you see how their GDP per capita increase over time. They were able to benefit from and promote and contribute and lead these technological revolutions. But every technological revolution we have, all the rest of the countries as the blue line falling behind. And now we are at the beginning of a new technological revolution. So the Industry 4.0, also the green technological revolution. And that is a risk that the countries don't really catch that at the beginning of that technological revolution, they will again fall behind on that. And if you think about how we can decarbonize industry, we can think about three ways to do that. One, using renewable technologies, renewable energy technologies. The other would be to combine the greening of the traditional global value chains by using new technologies, the digital technology. So this twin transition of green and digital. And the third one would be to diversify in the economies. These countries are still very reliant on few commodities, few products. They need to diversify the economies. So diversify the economies to products that we are more complex, meaning that they require more technology to be produced, not only in the factory, but throughout the process of production, and also that could be greener. So if we think about these three ways that we can think about decarbonization, we see that there are many opportunities in terms of this green frontier, of these green frontier technologies, be it wind, hydro, hydrogen, or even electric vehicle as part of that. In UNCTAD, we have some estimates that show that by 2030, it may be a market of 9.5 trillion of combined digital and green technology. But what we know is that so far, developed economies is the ones that were able to get most out of these opportunities. Even you see the increase in exports of these green technology from 2018 to 2021, increase has been higher in developed economies, even when we consider there the China as part of developing economies. So we know that countries have to move faster on that. And when we look at policies for countries that were able to catch up on these technologies for renewable energy, what we see is that, of course, in countries that have better initial conditions and strong responses, they are able to go faster and seize this green window of opportunities, these GWOs, green window of opportunities. But it's not required actually only to have these initial conditions. What we see is that even when countries have weak initial conditions, this can be compensated by strong policy effort. So there is a lot of policy that has to be in place, both in the supply side and the demand side of the economy. And one other thing that I would like to bring as a point is that all of that, what we are talking about here, is really creating opportunities for learning, for countries to learn and innovate and diversify the economies towards this more greener production. And it's important for us to understand that each technology is a very specific one, and we have to understand not only the technology, but different parts of the technology. So I'll give an example. The level of tradability of each element of this technology, it affects how competitive and the modes of competitiveness and dynamic and the modes of learning. For example, in solar PV, the capital equipment and inputs like industrial robots, assembly line designs and everything, this is a very tradable. Also, the energy generation technology like the solar panels, they are very tradable. And the output of it is the electricity is not that much tradable, it's medium level of tradability. So when you have a lot of a level of tradability that is very high, the country may need more protection to be able to, the industry may need more protection to be able to emerge in that country. So that it will give us some parameters of level of policy intervention that is required. So the second one that I mentioned is this twin transition, digital and green. So it's really, as was mentioned before, we have to really take the opportunity of this as one of the pillars that Jefferson was mentioned, the digital transformation, really to benefit from that and have the sustainability and the energy transition as the goal that gives the direction for this technology. So a lot of the gains in productivity comes from the digital transformation, right? So there where we get these gains in productivity, but then we have to direct them in the direction of sustainable outcomes. And we can do that. You have some examples here, capturing data using online connected sensors and GPS to reduce carbon emissions, smart manufacturing to consume less energy, voluntary sustainability standards to help upgrade the value chain. So that is very important. And the third one that I was mentioned before exactly is trying to help countries to diversify the economies, get out of this commodity dependence, create more jobs outside of commodity value chains, and by doing that, moving towards sectors that are both more complex and they have lower carbon footprints. The problem with that is that as this graph shows in the horizontal axis the complexity. The more complex, more technology is used in the production, capabilities required for the production, so the better it's better to move for those more complex products. And the vertical axis we have the average, like an index of carbon emissions associated up to that industry. And we see that unfortunately, the more complex the industry, the higher the carbon emission on average, unfortunately. But if we look at very disaggregated levels of production, not as an industry as a whole, but you go to the specific product, 6-digit level in the trade classification, and go even deeper, further disaggregate by price to be very specific, we are able to find products that are both more complex and it doesn't increase the carbon emissions, are not associated with higher carbon emissions. So it's important to have this idea of the identification of the where to move. So there it's important to have this direction. And I just want to illustrate in my last 6 minutes, illustrate with the case of the critical energy transition minerals. We know that these are the minerals that required for this energy transition, required for the technologies for energy transition, solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, bio, and so on, including electric vehicles and battery storage that I highlighted here with many minerals that are required for that, copper, cobalt, nickel, lithium, and so on. We know that the demand for these critical energy transition minerals is increasing very fast, much higher than the supply. To come up with a mining and start an operation, it may take 10 years, but we were mentioning before the high increase, Celine was mentioned the increase in sales of electric vehicles, so the demand is increasing very fast. And we have many developing countries that hold large reserves of the critical energy transition minerals. So we have Chile, Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, Turkey, Brazil, and so on. And so seems to be a great opportunity. It is, but if countries do not take really a strategic approach to it, it may end up being a new commodity to be dependent on, right? So increasing, perpetuating the commodity dependence. So what we need to understand is that is not only thinking about the mineral, we have to think about the whole value chain from mineral to the technology used there. And there are many, many, many industries and with potential for diversification, for increase of complexity and so on. So you have in the extraction, processing, battery, cell component, and electric vehicles. Unfortunately, developing countries are concentrated upstream in this value chain, while this value chain actually is become more valued, as this is the same value chain, instead of thinking about concentration in terms of share of exports, this is thinking about the value. Value is increasing as you go in this value chain. So you go from the extraction to the processing to the electric vehicle is for increasing the level of exports. And there's there that the developing countries have to try to aim. So it's important to have in mind that we have to think about value addition from mining, extraction, raw material, beneficiation, processing, precursors of battery material, battery packs, and so on, but go beyond that to have this vision of a structural transformation perspective where things that you have in one value chain, they feed in other value chains that you also have to promote. So you may have beneficiation of metals and minerals go to the chemicals value chain, and then from that you produce something like fertilizers that goes to the agro-food value chain, and so on. So you have all these things that are interconnected there. And we can even think beyond this value chain. If we think about the idea of using economic complexity, product space to try to identify products for diversification that are close of these capabilities of mining, we see that we have done this study and doing this here. We see that, for example, machinery, glue, furniture are potential diversifications out of lithium ore. For example, we can identify sectors for diversification sideways, outside of the value chain. So that's important for countries to have that in mind. And it's important to take in consideration that you don't need to have everything in one country only. You can build regional value chains. So this is the value chain exactly from lithium ore and brine to electric vehicles. And you see many countries in Latin America already can produce many of these products, and many others that are not highlighted in bold can also be producers of that, because they have capabilities that are close by to this production of these materials there. So just to few two words on policy, but we will discuss it more when we will be on the Q&A. It's important, as mentioned before, that to have this consistency between international trade agreements on trade, intellectual property, and climate change, because we have the Paris Agreement that is very strong and moving us towards, tackling the climate change and talking about countries to have access to green technology and so on, and common but differentiated responsibilities. And when you think about trade, that is so important to enable this transformation in countries, these are not exactly aligned. So we have to have a better alignment of that. And that means that trade rules should permit developing countries to foster the industrial green industry that are required, because these countries are not diversified at all. If we are thinking about industries in these countries going either to renewable energy technologies or technology that are the twin revolution, digital and green, or diversification towards more complex and greener products, all of them you talk about new industries, emerging industries, infant industries. So you have to have trade rules that allows that. And we need the intellectual property that also should be able to be flexible enough for developing countries that are less diversified, that are commodity dependent, to be able to have access and not only to be users of the technology, but to be participants of this a global market as producers in these value chains, a part of parts and materials and parts of these value chains. Well, I will finish here and really look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Clovis. It's a lot in 10 minutes. Thank you so much. It is really food for thought here. You mentioned several key words in my perception, as much as the others panelists. Like we have to move to a more towards a more complex industrial platform, and also a kind of nearshoring between developing countries, for example, to use the concept that Fernando brought. It's a nearshoring, better using the resources. But before passing, I'll make one question or two questions for us to foster the debate. I think we will start with you, Fernando, because I know you have a time constraint here. It's important for us to understand that if we do not, as developing countries, do not position ourselves also to question some of the technological choices that are made, and we only do copy and paste of technological base, talking about intellectual property, Clovis, I think sometimes we think that the flow of technology is only from the others to us. And actually, we have a lot of technology that we can use, and it's better fitted to go towards decarbonization. And also, we have a lot of technology, I'm talking about Brazil, but probably other developing countries, that can be shared from us to the world as well. So intellectual property has to go both ways, and we have to shift this idea that the arrow is only pointing to us and not from us to the others, and from us to us. And in order for this to happen, I fear that also we have to position ourselves to make the world to accept other technological paths other than the ones that are created there. For example, not only hydrogen is there, not only electrification, not only electrical vehicle is the solution. So with this, Fernando, I will start with a question to you from your presentation. It comes to my mind that actually multilateral banks, they do have, with the concept that you brought, do have a huge role to play. And what do you see is actually the role of multilateral banks to help decarbonize the industry sector and to help to push forward this power shoring or near shoring ideas that you shared with us, Fernando?
Thank you, Rosanna, for the questions. And you know, in terms of technology, you're right. You know, there's no silver bullet to solve all the issues that any energy transition across the world needs. So, for instance, the case of e-mobility means the electrification of the transports and vehicles. Latin America, compared with Europe, we have a huge cities, and those cities are, you know, most of our cities grew in a way that I would say very anarchic. So to solve the issue of emissions in the transport, it's not only electrifying the transport sector. It goes beyond that. Goes to intervene our cities. So as a colleague of mine says in CAF, it's the case of, you know, substitutions of internal combustion vehicles with electric vehicles. Then we will have green congestions. That's that we are looking. So we have to go further than that. We need to understand how our city works. We have to basically take out vehicles from our streets and bring more collective public transportation, and also we have to improve our transports for other things. So that's important thing to understand. Or technology, I mean, the technology is not enough. Changing an internal combustion vehicle with electric vehicles in Latin America, it's not the way to go. It's not the only way to go. We have to go to do more than that. I mean, we need to intervene our cities. That's one thing. The multilateral banks and the multilateral institution have been working in this energy transitions in many different ways. And one of the things we are working a lot more recently is to bring financial products that will make the difference in terms of changing fossil fuels for renewables or other type of low carbon energy. So as I said at the end of my presentation, bring in thematic bonds or green finance. It's very important for the transition. It's how you configure a financial instrument in a way that incentivize the bringing technologies or equipment to lower the emissions. And there is a lot of things that we can do, but I will stop here, given, you know, to give the space for the others to talk. And I have to give you you know, thank you for the invitation again, and I have to go. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you so much. And bye, Fernando. Celine, you were co-chair of the think tank 20 engagement group of the G20. and we as E+, we all were also there as co-chairs of the 2.1, actually. You were from the 2.1. How do you see that this initiative, us working hard to see policy briefs and to try to push forward an idea and a message, how do you see that this can help the agenda that we are discussing here? What is your vision?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Rosanna. Yes, I think this year is a critical year with Brazil being, the president of hosting the presidency of the G20 and putting a very clear focus on just transition, just energy transition when it comes to climate change, but generally speaking, putting a strong focus on social development and keeping together the social, economic, and the environmental dimension. So there's a key opportunity here. You mentioned we were the co-lead of the task force on energy transition and climate with Plataforma CIPO, and you were actually leading one of the subtopic of that task force. And I think when we came up with recommendations for the G20 that are now publicly available on the website, so do not hesitate to consult that webpage. But I think those recommendations were very much aligned with the discussion we're having today. In particular, the call and the push for having clear directions within countries that are, context specific, building on the value added and the critical assets of the countries, but that are really led by the countries themselves. And so that's why the first recommendation that we made was that the G20 could both lead by example, but also support, with finance capacity building, the development of long-term transition plans in all countries, so that those transition plans can be clear anchor for financial flows, be they private or public, that can benefit the countries themselves and help those countries' transitions. And that means that, further institutional capacities must be built to develop this capacity for long-term planning, because we're talking about long-term planning. We're talking about transition plans. So that was a very core recommendation we made. Please help develop yourselves transition plans that keep together this economic, social, and environmental dimension, but also help all countries to develop their own specific plans. But of course, the G20 being the G20, there should also be a strong leadership force for helping cooperation across the world, be they in terms of fostering a trading system that is conducive, an investment framework that is conducive, but also helping with the transfer of technology, be it from the north to the south, between the south, as you mentioned, Rosanna, as well. So that, there are mechanisms that can help this technology transfer. And sometimes, the technologies we're talking about are not necessarily those, very visible technologies. They can be homegrown technologies as well. And they can be very much relying on the country's asset. And finally, the last one I want to highlight among these recommendations, and again, everything is available on the G20 website, but is with regard to finance. In the absence of a global fund to promote transitions, I think a lot of the current discussion on international taxations or on, the MDB's reform or on the accessibility of the global funds could be conducive as well to helping countries develop these internal capacities, foster the investment environment. But we need to, the G20, gathers the countries that are the core shareholders of these MDBs, of the IMF. And so they have a critical role to play to open up these processes, simplify these processes, establish criteria, selection criteria that also prioritize some of the most vulnerable countries, in particular for public finance, because we know this is where it is much more difficult to capitalize and attract the private finance. So we hope the G20 can give a push to these reforms that are going in the right direction.
Yeah, so do I. Great. Thank you, Celine. In this regards, that if we manage to have a better international environment to push this agenda forward, and if how Clovis has well presented that we have to move towards a more complex industry and industry platform in the developing countries, especially in the emerging economies that are able to go do it in a very quick and fast way. I kindly ask Jefferson to you, as you presented, Brazil has a lot of comparative advantage, and it is admirable to see the Industry Confederation or Industry Association talking about green circular economy and greening their business. But in order for this to happen, a lot of conditions have to be there, among them demand for a greener product, someone paying at least a little bit for the green premium, or some kind of incentives or clear rule. How do you see, Jefferson, that the Brazilian industry can position itself to profit from this greener wave that is coming from the rest of the world and also from our own NDCs?
So as a citizen, for sure, my point of view, we have to pursue, we have to be in order to the 17 points created in order to achieve sustainable development, for sure. But as I told you, yeah, CNI is actually trying to push this strategy, this green strategy, in order to flow our balanced trade. That is very important because it's a difference. We are not allowed to, for example, not allowed to apply the carbon taxes and also prices. But if we try to incentive our industry in order to be more competitive to our tradable products, maybe we can achieve some results. For example, you, Rosana, you submit a program to German government in order to apply decarbonization for steel companies, very steel and cement producer companies. So that is very important. We are talking about a seed of 20, something like that, some 20 million euro, a seed money, in order to apply technologies inside companies, Brazilian companies. And then if you can prove that the results are good, we are more able to compete, to present our products to CBAM and IRA, for sure. But 25 million is not enough in this value chain. So then, but if you have such kind of cash flow, we can leverage the amount with the Brazilian government. For example, with having the help of BNDES. So what I'm trying to say, I'm just saying, is that if you want to be more competitive with our tradable products, I'm not talking about batteries, my friend Clovis Freire. With our tradable products, we have to prove we are in that game to CBAM and IRA, because, so sorry, CBAM and IRA are protectionism programs. Sorry. But my question is, how can we leverage the competitiveness? For example, we know very well that battery factories are in another level of economic complexity. But if you want to invest in a factory, right now is around $7 billion, a single factory. And we know very well, we don't have an entrepreneurial state. We have just governments. So then in the end of the case, and the world right now is facing a very high debt at a level of around $150 trillion. And is not performing loans and low interest rates. So in that case, I really cannot answer how can you be more competitive, because I know our country has no money in order to invest such kind of amount. USA, they are investing a lot, for example, for ships, and Europe with CBAM is reinforcing the capacity of production new technologies. Actually, I really don't know how can we improve our competitiveness in terms of new technologies. Carbon price is okay, but we can use just in some small fields.
I agree. Carbon pricing is part of the solution, but just part of it.
Just part of
there
it.
There is a lot more to be done in terms of incentives, and we have to think together. I think the industry and the government and the think tanks, and events like this one hopefully helps also for us to bring light to what is possible and to what we are aiming to be a country and to be relevant in this new green economy that is popping up around the globe. Clovis, I would end this section with a question to you that is regarding, we do have, as Jefferson mentioned, we do have a lack, not a lack, completely lack, but it's difficult to find financing conditions for such investments that has to be done, or for such investing this wave of increasing complexity in developing economies. So for Latin America specifically, in making this transition from a commodity export economy to an industrialized portfolio with higher value added, what are the main challenges? How critical you see this path is? And in this, how do you see critical minerals in that? And from your presentation, I understand we should not stick to be just exploring the minerals and exporting crude minerals, but we have to go deeper in the supply chain. But also, do you think we have to rethink some of the technologies that are put on the table today, to decarbonize? Like, should we really use that amount of batteries? So it's a kind of complex question. You answer on the go, Clovis.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, it's in the context of Latin America, but it's not restricted to Latin America. I think that one big issue and problem today is that we recognize, and we are talking about the problem and the importance to see this issue as the importance of industrial policy, so on. But you will be surprised that you will still find in many governments the question if we should use industrial policy, if industrial policy should be used. So I think one initial problem is that it's not yet homogeneous views in many governments of the importance for the government to really have an industrial policy that is bringing innovation and towards the energy transition and so on. There is, including in many commodity-dependent countries, there is a large share of the population and the politicians, the government, that believe that the country can do well with commodities if only can better use the resources, prevent corruption or do this and that. So always related to how to better manage the windfall and so on. So I think that is one issue. Then another issue that we see as well is that when there is the understanding that we do need to promote some of those industries, for example, critical energy transition minerals. And even when there are some mechanisms for financing it, or has been created some mechanism, they are very much restricted to mining sector. They don't have this view that this is something beyond the mining sector, that is beyond to the value chain. So it requires a view of the development of this sector together with the development of the industry as a whole, and with an industrial policy that is more that is beyond the further deepening what you have, but diversifying towards not new technologies, and have this view of the technological revolutions that is so important as well. So I would put this as two big issues that we not even reach to the point of we need finance, because we not even have been discussing that. And then when we have that understanding, I would say that the dynamics of the different markets are very specific. We talk about energy transition and renewables. We have to go much deeper, disaggregated what technologies we talk about. We have to be much more disaggregated in which value chains we want to prioritize and strategically try to enter. That requires knowledge from the government to identify sectors, identify value chains, identify areas on value chains when you want to go and be part of, and that planification on planning, it is something that is required. And so it sometimes you have the capabilities in many countries of Latin America to do that. So I would put some of these challenges on the table. I would say that there are many people, there are many champions for the industries that already exist, and the industries based on commodities and so on. But there are not many champions for what can be there that is not there yet. So it's very hard to find that political economy done, So yeah, I stop here.
It's quite interesting. I never really thought, as you structured the concept now, there's a lot of champions for the thing as it is, meaning a lot of commodities and commoditized economies. And we are lacking champions for other ways of doing it. It's interesting and very true, very, very true. Also, the way that the developing countries, that they concentrate themselves in exporting more commodities than other things, I think that has a lot to do with the process that we decided during the Washington Consensus, that some countries would be specialized in doing this and not that. So we lost a lot of our industry here in Brazil, the complexity of our industry here in Brazil, from there to now, and concentrated ourselves in a lot of commodities and exporting crude material, crude minerals with low added value in big volumes. But before passing to our last question from the audience, this food for thought, this way of doing things will lead us to net zero in 2050, especially when we think about scope 3, meaning transportation costs. If you have to fly parts and pieces of commodities of manufactured or products or industrial products all over the world, is this compliant with net zero 2050? I guess not, but it's food for thought here. We do have some questions from the audience. Unfortunately, we have just 5 minutes. So I will, who was that? Yeah. for all and for those who want to answer. This one is for Na Rocha to Jefferson. Sorry, Jefferson. How and when a carbon tax price could be introduced in Brazil as an incentive for industrial decarbonization? I'll read 3 of them and then we just compile the answer, and then 2 minutes for each, okay? Then another question said, you mentioned the importance of improving infrastructure, market quality and regulations in Brazil. What are the priority actions that the government and companies should take to achieve these goals? And last one, how can developing countries like Brazil implement green and digital transitions to meet consumption demands, ensure economic growth, and stay competitive globally? So I did the three questions all together, and we can, you just answer whatever one you want, and then we go to our end. So starting by Celine, your final comments as well.
Well, thank you, Rosanna. My connection is bad, so I struggle to hear the question. But I understand there were a couple of questions on Brazil that I won't pick up. I think there was a question on how developing countries could actually meet their transition goals while also meeting their development objectives, and I think this is a core question. This is a critical question. This is very challenging, and it's not that there is only one answer. And I think what we try to convey in the panel is that it will be very country specific as well. So it's not that we can say, oh, this is the solution that will work in all countries. I think there are things that can be done domestically. There's definitely issues that are collective issues that we need to be addressing at the international level. But there are things that and that are being picked up, be it in the G20, in what we mentioned in terms of the international financial architecture reforms and the MDB's reform. But I think the problem is what you were mentioning earlier, Rosanna, is that this is, if we think about the commitment of the Paris Agreement and the decarbonization by 2050, I think we have a time issue that keeping together the economic, social, and environmental dimensions within countries means that we also have to mitigate some of the adverse impacts of the energy transition, and that we have to keep in mind that it's very important for countries to connect their population to energy, to affordable energy, and so on, and to provide also quality jobs, and that sometimes might come at the expense of being faster on the climate objectives. And there, I don't think there's a very easy answer to that.
No.
I do think that what we said in terms of it has to be country specific, and the donors have to help. There's definitely a lot of investment in the business environment that needs to be done, a lot of institutional capacity building that needs to be done. I think there are collective actions and in terms of making the financial flows more coordinated, coherent through the country platforms that are being discussed, that there needs to be, like a scaling up of finance, we need to address the risk perception, the exchange rate as well. But it's a lot of, things that need to happen at the same time. So hard to answer just with one answer on that. But hopefully, with all the collective, willingness, I hope we can go in the good direction.
Right. Yeah, and awareness is being raised. I mean, I feel this year more aware than last year, because also many climate crises are happening under our own noses. So, Clovis, sorry, Jefferson, if you want to just 1 minute, your 1 minute food for thought here.
Actually, Rosanna, actually, I'm an engineer. I'm not an economist. then, from my point of view, we don't have a global solution. We have localized solutions with global competences localized in a specific way. In Brazil, for example, we have different solutions for different biomes.
Yeah.
Brazil is a continent, so then it's very different cultures inside the same country. So then it's very difficult to establish a common sense. The common sense, from my point of view, is the methodology. For example, we normally talk about science, technology, and innovation, but they are totally separated. Innovation and science are totally separated. If you talk about science, we are talking about scientific methodologies. If you talk about innovation, we are talking about business methodologies. So then we mix sometimes. We talk about green hydrogen. Oh, specific is good, but the amount of energy we need is very complex. If you construct a electrolyzer for 1 giga power, so 1 gigawatt of power, maybe during the development, maybe you can do something good, but the problem is the maintenance, because hydrogen is a very small molecule atom. So then the question is, how would be danger if I use a electrolyzer for a high intensive power? So then, if you're not allowed to say that with certain kind of certains, maybe we have to develop more science. So then maybe that's a discussion for institutions of scientific and technologies. But if we're talking about economy, we have to answer if we can provide such kind of technology continuously, scale up with scale, and also sustainable 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 structurization. So in that case, if you can supply, for example, biomethane in order to amplify the competitiveness of our food industry, protein industry, maybe we can replace diesel,
Natural gas.
using maybe biogas, or even using natural gas. But using biogas is interesting, because we have already the technologies. We have companies, they can produce engines, flexible engines using diesel and also natural and biogas together, methane. So, and then in that case, we can provide infrastructure, we can provide people, we can provide a marketplace, and we can provide regulations. But we are facing right now a problem of legislation. So in that case, we can talk about economy. So then I cannot say precisely what is better for Brazil. I can say maybe if you can answer that's science, or that is innovation, that's product, maybe if you can divide something like this, then we can use, for example, industry policy, my friend Clovis Freire, because sometimes I see actually have our own industrial policy to say it's our policy. But anyway, then if you don't mix something like that, some scientific aspect with technological innovation aspect, maybe we can provide a better industrial policies regarding applications of we are talking about. So anyway,
good challenge, Jefferson. And you mentioned several of very typical Brazilian decarbonization paths that we should look carefully to, and perhaps take it more seriously to develop, for example, a biomethane economy here to replace both natural gas and some part of the fossil feedstock. Clovis, I leave you this floor just to give your final words. We are 3 minutes over time, but we had the space there that we interrupted for 7 minutes. So the floor is yours, Clovis, just to give us your final smart words.
Oh, thank you. I have a few words to say. I just say that I think that, as Celine said, this is very country specific, and Brazil has very important opportunities and advantages. You know, it has capabilities in bio fuel, has capabilities related to the potential to use the forest and the biodiversity in very strategic ways and in wise ways to bring new technology, to bring new potential new products to the world. So really capitalize on all of those things. So I see that there are opportunities, and it's important to think strategically about them. And I just want to give one final word, is that for us to also understand that these strategies should also come into the national level to avoid the potential perpetuation of inequalities within the country that we know so well that exist. We know that Brazil has areas that are so developed and so industrialized, and areas that are really lagging behind. So we do have the same problems of inequality within the country. And if we don't go for this process of innovation and diversification and industrial policy in a way that take that in consideration, we may perpetuate this inequality within the country as well. So that's also important for us to take in consideration this aspect.
Thank you so much, Clovis, for these final words. Unfortunately, our webinar comes to an end here. I just want to thank a lot for your participation, all the panelists, very insightful and deep considerations, and also for our audience. I must say that this was transmitted by YouTube, so it will be there for everyone that wants to see again or re-see or see for the first time. And the questions from the audience will be answered after, because we ran out of time in our discussion. And again, sorry for having interrupted the transmission right in the beginning, but finally we managed to come to this end. Thank you so much, everybody.